Certainly, folks. Is the NHL season all but gone? I think that it is. Elliot Friedman from Hockey Night in Canada is going to join us after 2 o'clock. And we'll also talk to a labor lawyer who talks about the NHL decertification, the union and union decertification and what it might mean in terms of getting a deal done. And if it's something that would be good or bad. Sounds exciting, doesn't it, folks? Talk about labor law coming up in a half an hour. Don't go anywhere. That's a real great tease. But first, a really sad story from the NFL this past weekend. A player by the name of Jovan Belcher. He actually, it's a really neat Cinderella story. It doesn't happen that often that you go to university and you're not drafted by an NFL team and you just walk on and you make the team. Not only make the team, but make the starting lineup. And in interviews from earlier this past year, he seems like a pretty normal, down-to-earth kid.
I mean, it's been a great blessing, you know. Coming in, everyone hopes for the best. Even now, you hope for the best, but you still want to set your goals even higher and higher to the point where they're unbelievable, but you still want to set them high and you want to reach for them.
So that is the player. That's the football player who committed suicide after killing his girlfriend. And here's the story if you have not heard it.
Kansas City Chiefs linebacker Jovan Belcher had already killed his girlfriend. Belcher then drove to the Chiefs practice facility where he thanked head coach Romeo Crennel and GM Scott Pioli for giving him, an undrafted free agent, a chance to play in the NFL. Then Belcher turned away, holding a handgun to his head, and pulled the trigger. A murder-suicide that has left the sports world in shock, and those related to this tragedy in deep mourning. Authorities did not release a possible motive, only to note that Belcher and his girlfriend, Cassandra Perkins, had been arguing before he shot her multiple times. His mother witnessed the shooting.
Imagine that. But imagine being that football coach and the general manager who is confronted by one of his players and has to watch that happen. The coach, though, isn't saying much.
I'm choosing not to answer any questions about what I saw yesterday. And I think that you'll understand that, and hopefully you'll respect my wishes on that, because it wasn't a pretty sight. And so I'm choosing not to talk about it.
All right. In a second, we'll talk to a leading expert when it comes to concussions and what he has to say about this, because Jovan Belcher is a man who is known to have had some concussions, and this behavior, if it is linked, and I want to say if there is a track record of other players doing similar things, but also I don't know that it might be too early to make a real line between the two of them. It's 1:40 in Toronto. It's time to go into the News Talk 1010 newsroom, and joining us right now is our breaking news producer. David Bradley is here with information on the Rob Ford case.
Thanks very much, Jim. Clayton Ruby, who is the lawyer who is with Paul Magder, the Toronto resident, and that, of course, ruling in the conflict of interest case that led to the ouster of Mayor Rob Ford from office. Well, Mayor Ford will be back in court on Wednesday to have his stay of the ruling heard by the judge in this case, and until that time is expected to stay in office. Now today, Clayton Ruby said that on behalf of his client, he consented to a stay of the order to remove Ford from office pending the outcome of the appeal. And he said in a release, by breaking the law in such a flagrant manner, Rob Ford has put the city into unnecessary turmoil. We're agreeing to the stay to give the city of Toronto a measure of stability. But there's still no word yet if this means that Rob Ford is granted that stay or if it still has to be heard by the judge. But it sounds like Clayton Ruby will not fight
will not be contesting it.
Exactly.
But that doesn't make any sense. He says that the city needs some stability, thus he's going to allow a stay so Rob Ford can stay mayor, and yet he worked on behalf of a client to kick Rob Ford out of office.
Sounds strange, doesn't it?
Way to go, Clayton. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but that just sounds bizarre. And he's not going to fight the appeal. I mean, in the appeal, he will be arguing that the guy should be kicked out.
That's right.
All right. More information at the top of the hour. David Bradley from the News Talk 1010 Breaking News Desk. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, 1:42 here on In-Depth Radio in Toronto, News Talk 1010. We're talking about this tragic case. Imagine being that coach. Imagine being that coach. He's helped this young kid, this football player, have this Cinderella story, a walk-on that made the team and the starting lineup. He kills his girlfriend, and then he drives to the practice facility and shoots himself in front of the coach and in front of the general manager. Some people thought that the game should have been canceled. I'm not one of them. I don't think you let something like this. I mean, you have to kind of get over it and keep moving forward. Irvin Muchnick joins us right now. He's the author of several books, plus a line of ebooks about the concussion crisis in football, and his website is concussioninc.net. And Irv, thank you very much for your time.
Hey, good to be here, Jim.
Is it too early to connect concussions to this tragedy? I think it probably is. We'd both agree on that?
Yeah, it probably is. I mean, Deadspin, this provocative sports site, has some anonymous information from a friend of Belcher's that says he got knocked around in the last couple of games, but we have to take that with a grain of salt. I don't think it's inappropriate to connect this to the overall debate over football safety and brain trauma, but we probably don't have any forensics on this yet, and we may never, since unlike Dave Jurison and Junior Seau, Belcher turned the gun not on his chest but at his head, and he blew his brains out. So what are you going to study?
Yeah, but knowing your history with head injuries and concussions in the NFL, would you be shocked? Is there anything that we know that other players have done similar things? I know you just mentioned other suicides, but what other kind of similar behavior have we seen anybody take their spouse's life because of stuff like this?
Well, we have the suicides. We don't have murder-suicides that I'm aware of in recent history. There's one going back about 20 years. But what I do think is the author of a book about Chris Benoit, who's a big Canadian hero, and in 2007 murdered his wife and his 7-year-old child before taking his own life just prior to a WWE pay-per-view. I certainly see parallels and see the Belcher story as perhaps another step on the road to public education on this issue, and perhaps football's Chris Benoit story.
Do we know for sure that Chris Benoit, I want you to address this in a second, had brain injuries because of concussions? That in a second with a concussion and head injury expert, Irvin Muchnick. It's 1:45, In-Depth Radio in Toronto, News Talk 1010. Time saver traffic. The NHL union should decertify that coming up after 2 o'clock. And what it would mean? Would it mean that the teams would be back on the ice a lot sooner? And Elliotte Friedman will join us. And I'll say to Elliotte, just admit it, Elliotte. The season's over. It's 1:46 here on In-Depth Radio News Talk 1010. Irvin Muchnick is with us right now. He is an expert on concussions, especially related to the NFL. And so, Irv, we categorically know that the Chris Benoit story was related to head injuries?
Oh, we absolutely do. I mean, post-mortem, his brain was studied by Dr. Bennett Amalu, and in fact, it was the first announcement by the Sports Legacy Institute in Boston, which is headed by Chris Nowinski, who himself was a WWE wrestler. So we know that Chris Benoit, in addition to being a heavy steroid abuser, in addition to probably suffering from clinical depression, having marital problems, and so forth, did have one of the worst known cases of this chronic traumatic encephalopathy phenomenon.
And what does the NFL do about this kind of stuff? Again, we know that this case is up in the air, but do they see any connection or any responsibility to their players who put their health on the line, albeit for, a heck of a lot of money, but do they see any responsibility? Are they taking any?
Well, they started out by denying the CTE research, and in my view, covering it up for a number of years with their own doctors' articles in research journals. After congressional testimony in 2009, 2010, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell finally admitted the veracity of this field of research, at least. And so what you do is if you're the $10 billion a year NFL, you either yank a bad tooth or you fill it with gold. They are now subsidizing research at the National Institutes of Health. They are now subsidizing our governments on this side of the border, Centers for Disease Control directives on sports and concussions. So they've gone from denying the problem to attempting to co-opt it and contain it. And of course, as most people know, there are now more than 3,000 retired NFL players who have participated in more than a dozen class action lawsuits over their own alleged disability, which is going to be litigated in our court system over the next decade.
Irv, interesting stuff. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Irv Muchnick is the author of several books, including a couple of e-books on the concussion crisis in the NFL and the lack of action from the NFL. Yesterday, Bob Costas in the halftime show, some people are really angry at Bob Costas, saying, you know what, you shouldn't be using this murder-suicide for an infomercial for greater gun control. By the way, the Second Amendment down in the United States, which allows people the right to bear arms, it has been challenged in the Supreme Court, and there are some restrictions. Even some members of I think it's Scalia, who is a Republican-appointed Supreme Court justice, even he says that the Second Amendment allows people to own guns, but there are reasonable restrictions when it comes to guns. But people were really, really mad at Bob Costas yesterday for saying some of these things.
Our current gun culture, Whitlock wrote, ensures that more and more domestic disputes will end in the ultimate tragedy, and that more convenience store confrontations over loud music coming from a car will leave more teenage boys bloodied and dead. Handguns do not enhance our safety. They exacerbate our flaws, tempt us to escalate arguments, and bait us into embracing confrontation rather than avoiding it. In the coming days, Jovan Belcher's actions and their possible connection to football will be analyzed. Who knows? But here, wrote Jason Whitlock, is what I believe. If Jovan Belcher didn't possess a gun, he and Cassandra Perkins would both be alive today.
Well, that's impossible to predict, and I think irresponsible to say. I mean, if O.J. Simpson's wife had a gun when he came at her with a knife, maybe she would be alive today. So to say that the gun is responsible when we just talked about Chris Benoit, the wrestler who killed his own wife and then took his life, that didn't involve a gun. It's not the gun's fault that somebody wants to kill somebody. And while America does have a lot of problems when it comes to gun control, especially when it comes to gangs and that kind of stuff, I don't know that in domestics where more people are killed by their partner